Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Mind interview series where we talk to people who are just like you, doing their best to be their best. And today I have with me Skyler Healy, a wonderful friend of mine, incredible inspiration, athlete, professional, building communities left and right. Skyler, I'm excited for everyone to learn a bit more about your story and get to know your very modern mind. So let's go ahead and have you kick things off with who are you and what do you do?
Great start. And thank you, Lizzie, for having me. I'm super excited. And yes, it is a real treat to be here. I have a lot to share, and I think we align on a lot of different things. So this is going to be awesome. Who am I? So Skyler Healy grew up in Westchester, which is right north of New York City. Currently sitting in an office in Midtown, so didn't really travel too far. But I currently am the community and operations manager of Uncharted, which is a kind of a global founder, funder, investor industry leader creator community. So we do events across the country. San Francisco, Miami, New York City is our biggest hub. Los Angeles, where we create real containers for kind of the world's best operators and entrepreneurs to really come together, collaborate. Hopefully leads to real business outcomes and acceleration for you and your company. So kind of call me an in-person hinge. I like to say we really connect people really thoughtfully and curatedly with if that's a word, through our event series, through our digital platforms, and through the data that I have. So I'm a community builder at heart. I also big mountain biker, big athlete, played a lot of different sports. Um, bounced a lot around a lot of different sports as a competitive gymnast for a very long time. I 24, so I haven't done uh, as much outdoor adventures as I want to do, but in my last 2 years, I've already mountain biked across Iceland and backpacked across New Zealand. So I've been very
Wow.
interested in the outdoor adventure kind of pursuits. So hopefully, I have many more trips of that nature planned soon. Um, Big football player when I was younger. Um, can juggle. I've kind of been a Swiss Army
Yeah.
knife, if you will, all across a lot of different things. Um, but
I
yeah,
love it. Everyone needs a juggler on their team. That's what I've always said. I I'm curious, what brought you to fitness? Especially like it sounds like it's more extreme because I know also you're training for is it a triathlon now?
yeah. So I just ran my first half marathon, and I really put that goal in my mind as like I'm kind of taking each thing piece by piece and making it really methodically choosing the strategy behind each. So I did my first half marathon. I already combined the biking component a bit, but it wasn't really distance. It was through the glaciers of Iceland over 8 days. But yeah, so I have a big bike race coming up in August, basically biking across Slovenia, 8 days
Whoa.
camping through the mountains. So I'm super excited about that. But I think I've really just been, and this I can talk a little bit more about like the struggles that I've overcome and how they've built a sense of grit and passion for pursuing difficult things. But I've kind of been drawn to just the adventure, the the
Totally.
the atmosphere, just the nature has been a big part of my life growing up. In kind of suburbs and having my family living up in Portland, Maine. So I've always been drawn to the beach and escaping city life as much as I can. So yeah.
Wow. Now I you just tickled the curiosity like in me. So let's talk a little bit about what brought you to these more kind of extreme sports. Like what was it that you went through that led you
Yeah.
there?
Uh, so growing up in Westchester, I grew up in a very, I guess you could say, affluent neighborhood. People have proximity to New York City. They're very, they work in finance or they're very have nice houses and nice cars and all that stuff. And I didn't necessarily come from the same level of that, but lived in the same area. So I've kind of always been uh, had this chip on my shoulder, and on top of that, combine that with growing up, I did have a battles with depression and anxiety and ADHD. So I've always kind of felt like the underdog and that I was a little bit different. And also dealing with divorce and alcoholism in my direct family. I've constantly kind of been battling myself in different ways where I've overcome a lot.
Wow.
And especially when I was younger, dealing with the struggles that I faced, I really built a sense of self that I don't think I would have if I didn't go through these things. So fast forward to today, I've really built a really deep understanding of who I am and what I care about. And that's part of why I like to do these things, because I enjoy the challenge and I've built this sense of I believe in my capabilities and I believe in my worth in ways that I wouldn't have really been able to articulate and understand if I didn't go through hard things. So I constantly now choose to do it. I kind of just get the thrill
Yeah.
of like, all right, what's next? Like, gonna go swim. I'm swimming a 2K race on Long Island Sound to raise money for cancer awareness in
Wow.
July as well. So it's just kind of like I have such belief in my capabilities now, going through all that, and then kind of coming from, I didn't go to an Ivy League school as an example, and I've already built two massive communities. So um, I think proving to myself that I can handle these things and I can overcome challenges is part of my identity.
Yeah. And that's really, really powerful. I'm curious, like, before we kind of talk about more of your athletics and your challenges, because I'm very curious about those and also these huge communities that you've built. I do want to spend a little bit more time on your childhood.
Yeah,
So you talked about anxiety, depression, ADHD. I feel like these days those are very, very openly talked about on TikTok and Instagram and like and just generally at work, people are a lot more open about these kinds of mental health struggles. But I have to imagine growing up that was like pretty hard
yeah,
generally. And so what was that like first? And second was like how did you work to kind of manage, move through, gain this sense of self given that?
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, I have to give a lot of credit to my mother. She was the real anchor in a lot of different things and was the kind of the core advocate. She's a psychiatrist, as an example. So she was very adamant on therapy. So very early on, I was exposed to therapy and how important it is, and to really take the time to one, understand yourself and the challenges you're facing, and kind of accept it and acknowledge it. It's kind of the first step to any sort of overcoming of difficulties. So as a kid, I was, kind of a rambunctious, all over the place, emotionally, challenged person. So getting myself into that sort of mindset of like, okay, I have to accept this was a little bit difficult, but I'm fortunate to have a mom that was very like, you need to do this. And I was like, okay. Uh, Thankfully so, because, at this day and age, um, speaking about this stuff can be a little bit of a tricky situation, but having gone through it personally and can speak on the matter as from experience, I can firsthand say how important it is to acknowledge that you need help and that you need support and take the necessary action to follow through with that. Um, so as a kid, it was definitely challenging, committing to that and really working through, and that comes with maturity as you grow and into a young adult, like really being able to articulate yourself and understand your emotions and understand why you do certain things. Um, is always an ongoing thing. But the first start is really acknowledging the steps you need to take and then doing them. Um,
Totally.
so yeah,
Yeah. And you said that you did gymnastics and football growing up. Did people know that these were struggles of yours? Like, was this a more of like a private thing? Did you do those to help with
yeah.
your mental health challenges?
So not many people knew. I think very very select few knew that I struggled with a lot of things in middle school and even high school. It was a very closeted sort of situation I was dealing with. I wasn't very vocal about it. I was kind of this very shy, insecure kid that had a hard time making friends, and therefore, ironically, kind of plays into today. I had a lot of friends that are very surface level, so I was kind of like that. Everyone knew me, but nobody really knew me in a way.
Totally.
Um, so in growing from like 6 years old to I think eighth grade or seventh grade, I was a very deeply committed competitive gymnast. So I actually won states. I was the best tumbler in New York State at
Wow.
one point in 2011 at West Point Military Academy. So that was a big win that I had. That was part of my identity, right? And then going into middle school, I had struggled with a lot of depression and anxiety and ADHD problems with academics and whatnot. So I wasn't the greatest student. I bounced around between Catholic school and then public school. And I had to actually stop doing gymnastics because of those challenges I was facing. So then I became, all right, loss of identity. What do I care about? Who is Skyler? Like kind of reshaped all of that for myself. So then going into high school, I joined the track team and the football team, just like, out of the water, didn't really have any experience in any of that. And um, did that for 3 years. So I was on the varsity football team for two of them. Played a variety of positions: wide receiver, outside linebacker, kicker. Um, to really just immerse myself in a different type of crowd, as someone who was a gymnast going to football, different type of vibe, different type of energy.
Totally.
So I got really exposed to different types of people, and that honestly strengthened what I do now is building relationships with a vast breadth of backgrounds and personalities and interests. So again, that goes back to everything that kind of happened plays a role and a lesson into who I am today.
Totally. And what's interesting, I can't help but notice, is that it sounds like with football, it was really about getting to know the team and like working together as a group and getting to know all these folks who felt really different than what you were used to. But it sounds like a lot of your sports and athletic endeavors and challenges now are solo in a way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I've kind of always been I'm going to beat to the rhythm of my own drum. So, as an example, and me saying this now is very different than I would have said this like 10 years ago, but I've been sober my entire life. So, I have never drank alcohol. Personal decision. Just I knew what was best for me at the time, and I've stuck
Religious?
with that. No, just I mean, growing up with alcoholism in my direct family, and then also the challenges I
Yeah,
faced as a kid, I made that decision like this is what I need to do, and this is what I'm going to stick with. And it's honestly
totally.
become a cheat code. Not to be
Yeah.
honest, like I'm.
I feel like everyone now, like their wearables are
I got my
catching you up,
Aura
so
ring, I
watch
got my
out.
Apple Watch. Like I'm
Yeah.
ultra efficient, super happy, healthy, but also like productive at work and all that stuff. And also as an extrovert and having built the ability to communicate and very interpersonal, I love going out. I'm going to a rave next week. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
which I love, by the way. I don't drink either anymore. I did in my
yeah.
20s, but I do believe it's a cheat code, and I love that you're out in that way. It's really special, but it took me longer, I think, to get there, and mine were more health related.
Yeah. So I mean it's
So,
just my choice again, not to
yeah,
force that on anyone else, but so the kind of mindset that I'm always going to beat to my own drum was, you know, shaped throughout all different avenues of my life. But I really kind of ties back to building belief in myself that I can overcome things and really shape my own destiny, if you will, just by hard work, you know, taking risks. And also, I think a big part of that was removing my ego, like asking for help, being able to advocate that, like, I'm not doing okay, I need support, or can you help me with this? I don't understand that. Um, really brought mentors in my life and they helped shape my career trajectory and how I view the world and the how I show up every day in a way that I probably would not have had happen if I didn't you know exist the way I did.
yeah. I think it's interesting because, like, I can't help but think of the metaphor of like a mountain. Like, usually we have to hit the valley before we can like really climb kind of our tallest challenge or like our tallest, whatever. It sounds really cheesy, but I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, what was your lowest valley? Like whether it was a failure point or like the hardest moment that you've had, and like and then how did you start that like upward climb of like figuring out you like these challenges and getting into kind of these like more physical spaces and, you know, leaning on your extroversion to like build these communities?
Yeah. This is a funny example. I like to think of the mountain is still ongoing. There's just peaks and valleys that, as you can, like kind of like a graph, right? You keep having ups and downs, but I think the lowest point would probably be my parents had gotten divorced. I'd moved to a new town. I was really depressed, struggling with figuring out my ADHD and various other challenges that I was facing, anxiety, social awkwardness when I was in middle school. Um, Starting therapy, medication, getting into, transferring to a boarding school, just kind of really I didn't know who I was very out of, sync with myself. And that was definitely a very dark period of my life. So I'd say that was the lowest point, and then climbing myself out of that, into ending of middle school, into high school, joining the new football team and all that stuff was really just the pinnacle upwards. Um, and then you have another low point was like post grad after I graduated college. I graduated with an HR management and marketing degree. I mean, it's similar to what I do now, but like not directly correlated at all in certain ways.
Yeah.
Um, where I didn't have a job, so the summer after graduation, I was living in Georgia and had to move back home to live in my grandparents' basement because I was just like, I don't, know what to do. Didn't get a return offer from the internship that I had. Um, didn't really have a clear direction of the job market was not great. So that was another low point, and that ties into how I got originally started at Uncharted, and then also reading rhythms, and then how I kind of cut the lifeboats. Was like, all right, I'm committed to this, and the rest is history.
Wow. Now, we've talked a little bit on Uncharted. Can you talk about reading rhythms? What is it?
Yeah. So okay. So think book club, but way more social and fun. So as a whole, as a collective in New York City and just in general, a lot of people are meeting each other. Either you're talking about your company or job title, which creates instant distance and respect statuses and kind of hierarchy, or B, you're using alcohol and going through nightlife to meet people, and people feel pressure to put on a facade or conform. Um, so the original idea, I have to credit Tom Worcester and Ben Bradbury as the original starters of this. Um, but is how can we create a community centered around what book you're reading and why? So books, if you will, you're interested in the book, you're interested in the topic. It's an easy conversation starter. So the event format was read for 30 minutes, turn to a friend what book you're reading and why, go back to reading in silence for 30 minutes. So you combine the ability to recharge and focus on a book that you wouldn't really have had the time for otherwise, and also connect with some other cool humans about certain topics that you may or may not align with. Everyone is reading different topics and whatnot. You walk away with some really cool friends that you have actual conversations in depth with because you're all talking about a variety of different niches and whatnot. So, anyways, that was the philosophy. That was the concept. We ended up scaling that organization. I ended up coming in as the initial operator. I actually moved in with the current founder and CEO, and we whiteboarded everything, built all the systems and everything to me hiring 15 individuals, scaling it to from one event a month to six a week. So we had 100 people per
Wow.
event, six events a week, 2,000 guests a month. We were featured on Good Morning America, the Today Show, the New York Times, the Washington Post, scaled the Instagram page to 70K followers. Um, Currently and today, I mean, we ran actually the highest reading party ever organized on the Edge platform. So systems operations kind of became my niche, scaling that organization. Now, as a current organization, Reading Rhythms has done events in London, Rome, Paris, Los Angeles, Toronto, DC. Started a movement, so it was a really cool thing to be the initial catalyst for. So yeah,
That's amazing. I have to ask, little segue, what's the best book you've ever read
there's so
and
many,
why?
and I will be honest that a lot of the time when I was building reading rhythms, I was not reading because I was running
Yeah.
around like my head's on fire. But I would say the best book that I had ever read, I would say what was most impactful at the time was Grit by Angela Duckworth. It's a book about how, you know, you don't have to be the genius. You just have to know how to work hard and leverage your current skills to you can surpass anyone. So that was inspiring to me. It's kind of always being like this underdog, if you will. Um, so that was a great book that really inspired me at the moment. I would say another great book was The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. There's a line in there that I really took to heart was private wins before public victories. So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people who get their sense of self security and validation from their output. And I think a lot of the time I was chasing that, and I really had to think through, okay, how am I showing up for my friends, my family, those that matter? How am I um, feeling secure in myself and my purpose outside of just the number of views that I get or any sort of validation from my boss or anything like that? It's like I really had to really think deep of how I want to take care of the inner work first and the challenges that I had faced, as a kid. So that's again why I think doing hard things, like biking across Iceland, was not something I really was like publicly talking about as like, oh, I did this. It was like, no, I proved to myself that I am who I say I am. So yeah,
Which I love. I really love. And I want to talk about these like physical challenges. So, what's been like the hardest one to date for your mental fitness?
yeah. Um, so I think Iceland for sure because we were 8 days we covered about 30 kilometers a day, but it was 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And we were biking
Whoa.
in wind and rain through 99% unpaved roads. So it was through the mountains. So it was a lot of, and we had 16 hours of daylight. So we were not getting a lot of sleep. We were cooking our own food. All of our gear was on our bikes, and we just had to keep powering through due to intense rain and wind. So it was just a lot of mental fortitude. Just get up in the morning, eat the same food, and keep going. So I would combine that with not just the physical challenge, but also the mental challenge of just keep pushing forward. Um, so I would say
And I
Iceland
have
for
to,
sure.
yeah, and I have to ask, one, I can't help it. What did you eat every day? And two is, what was going through your head? Like, I feel like most people would hear that and be like, yo, Skylar, that's not fun.
Yeah.
Like, why?
So it's funny because I have a lot of friends in, New York City who were like, I will never go camping my entire life. So,
Yeah.
and
Let alone bike camping.
yeah, imagine bike camping. So
Yeah.
you know, nature has always been a drawing force for me because as someone who's ADHD and is very like all over the place, building things, doing things, moving people, moving parts, whatnot. Being in stillness as an escape is so calming to me and is so you really think and process and the thoughts you have and the feelings you have just kind of like exist and you acknowledge them in ways that you don't really get in the hustle and bustle of New York. So I think combining that with I've kind of built this, I wouldn't call it a hack because it's well known, but exercise builds a confidence from a fit body, but also endorphins and mental health. Everything is in sync. Where if I didn't do that, I would not be as productive, healthy, happy. So when you combine the physical exertion with beautiful landscapes and unbelievably astonishing views, with also a group of my cousins who were all very much in this together, what made it fun and exciting and enjoyable. So that's kind of combining all three is the sweet spot.
Wow. Very cool. Now, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, which is so there's like mental fortitude against like a real life challenge, which is like, you know, biking across a country or, swimming across a, you know, insane body of water to raise money, which is all difficult in its own way. And then there's like the day-to-day difficulties, which is like going on a date sober or like going to a rave when everybody's all messed up and like trying to still have fun,
Yeah,
especially knowing that you have a history of social anxiety and like this kind of thing. So like how do you work through those moments? Like what's that like for you?
it's interesting. So as an example, my freshman year of college, everyone was going to frat parties. And I was like, hell no, I'm not going to that. I'm gonna go like sit in my room, do my work, or just like figure something else out or find other people that wouldn't do that. And I think that skill of being able to exist in the same environment as people who are uh, intoxicated or wanting to partake in these activities was a real challenge that by sophomore year, I was like, all right, I have to be able to do this if I'm going to have friends and have a social life. So putting myself in those situations was almost necessary to fulfill my general needs of connection and friendship and community because the environment I was forced to be in, right? So it wasn't I'll just, do it and it'll be easy and I'll figure it. It was definitely a trial and error, really understand myself and be confident that, I can meet people and say hello and network and make friends as I am versus I have to conform to the activities that everyone else is doing. So my senior year, actually, I ended up hosting some massive events in my own apartment and across campus and from a business lens. I ran a university's consulting group. So my hack was, in a way, I'm going to organize the event. So everyone comes to me. So I ended up hosting a lot of different parties at my place, but then also I founded the School of Management's case competition. We ran
Oh,
a bunch of, you know, different networking events and brought in partners and all that stuff to really facilitate some really cool experiences and workshops for students as well.
love it. That's really big. And I think a lot of times people think like, again, I don't drink either. And, I was dating in New York City without drinking and people are just like, how do you do that? How do you handle it? And like, to your point, like brute force and awkwardness, like you muscle through, you have those nights that are weird or where you feel a little left out because you're just like not in the hazy crowd, it's whatever. And then eventually you get to a point where you do a better job picking your dates and you do a better job picking your friends and you go home a little earlier and you're up early and you kind of get to your point, it's a cheat code. You get to go to the party and wake up in the morning and do all your stuff. So,
Exactly.
um,
It
no,
goes,
it's
it comes
great.
back to, right? Like, if you have undeniable evidence and proof of who you say you are is who you say you are, and you know what you care about, you can walk into any room and show up as who you are and feel confident while doing so. And if people don't respect you, that's their choice, right? You have your core
Totally.
friends, you know who your inner circle is, and you build this sort of impenetrable shell that is, if you don't like it, that's your choice. It's kind of like, Mel Robbins, she's got
Yeah,
like the
of
let
course.
them theory she talks about. It's actually very
Yeah,
proven true to be like, it's their choice. I'm just going to keep living my life and showing up the way I want to show up.
for sure. So it's interesting because you talked about your love for hard things, like doing these challenges and building that grit, and how that's built confidence. And like, it sounds like it's a huge part of your identity. But where do you find ease in your life?
I am fortunate to have a very strong group of very core friends who I've been very honest with and who know my story and know who Skyler is and why he does things the way he does. And having those people, I'm in charge of a 3,000 person kind of global community, right? So you're always putting on some sort of, excuse me, some sort of act, right? In a way that you can, keep up the same positivity and uh, sort of networking attitude, whatever. But my friends know me for me, and they allow me to kind of be myself, decompress, share my own concerns, and be super vulnerable and honest. So that's kind of been a really big safe haven for me, where I think a lot of people sometimes combine work with social life, and that's fine. I do the same thing, but I'm very fortunate to have a really core group where I can just, they've known me for a very long time.
That's amazing. And it brings me to my next question, which is, would you describe yourself as an introvert or extrovert? And whichever it is, how does that help or hurt your mental fitness?
I would definitely say I'm an extrovert for sure. I thrive around people. I love meeting new ones and learning about their stories. And I also just love gathering people and having them meet each other. I'm kind of like I've introduced a lot of people to each other as well. Um, I think being an extrovert forced me, again, back in like college as an example, to need to meet others in a way where I need to show up authentically and deal with any sort of, rejection from a friend perspective or romantic perspective as well. But really be like, all right, if I'm gonna fill my needs of I want to have connection, I want to have a social life, I have to really understand myself and what my principles are and what my values are and be concrete with them and still show up in a way that is social and out there. And that built a sense of, resilience in a way because it didn't come like that. It was over time.
Yeah. What would you say your values are?
It's something I'm still working through of like, if you have a personal branding, personal mission statement, like what is that? I think it's always evolving and again, I'm young, I'm still figuring a lot out, but I like to be authentic. I like to be honest. I like to be kind and caring. I like to work really hard. I like to challenge myself. I like to have fun. I like to be real, you know? And I like to enjoy moments that matter, if you will. So I've become more selective in how I spend my time. And if it's not something that I align with, I've gotten much better at being like, yeah, I'm not going to have FOMO because it doesn't align with, what I care about. So,
Totally.
so yeah.
And I think there's this interesting thing. I talk about this a lot, actually. So, my values: family, friends that feel like family, learning, growth, personal development, play,
Yep.
lightness, fun, jokes, humor. And then lastly is truth. Um, and I think like the whole idea of values is that ideally you find that you're able to live them on your best days and on your hardest days, you're working towards them. They're kind of this like true north.
Mm,
And so one of the things that you called out, which I thought was interesting, is like you talked about this idea of being real. And at work, sometimes you're not always able to be real because you've got this community to run. How do you work with that tension? Because I have my own versions of tension with my work and my values every day, but I'm curious.
It's honestly something that I still grapple with. It's a
Yeah,
very tight conundrum that I don't know if there's ever a solve for because each case is, very different and each person is very different. But I think it's a matter of finding that balance between uh, there's different levels to the story. There's different levels to how much you share. There's different levels to how much energy you put into people. Um, and I think there's different situations that require different mindsets, right? You're
totally.
negotiating a sponsor partnership. You have to have a very different mindset than if you're trying to get someone to come to an event, right? So I think things are case by case basis, and you have to be able to separate the business from the person. So navigating that has always been a ongoing challenge, but I think the role that I have as like head of community and operations, it fits who I am well, very well, where I am in a role that I feel is part of my identity and how I show up in the world anyways. And I encourage that for anyone to always find jobs that they intrinsically feel aligned with and motivated by. So I'm lucky that I can be myself, be an extrovert, enjoy connecting with people, supporting others, but also I have to remember that I can't solve everyone's problems. I have to be able to say no. I have to think of this as a business. My mission is to support my team, my immediate team of people that I work with. So it's like, where do my priorities lie? So that's kind of what I have to always navigate and juggle. And I think that just comes with experience. But at the end of the day, staying true that I'm a kind, caring person and how I show up with my friends and family, if I'm doing that correctly, it can be a little bit easier to be like, I'm sorry, I don't have time for you. I have to, or I'm not in the place to support you this way. So it's always that kind of balance, push and pull thing that is an ongoing battle. But I always go back to, I am someone who enjoys what I do, so it makes it 10 times easier.
Totally. I hear that. And I think one of the things that you said that struck me is just this also idea of like energy expenditure. I was just talking about this with a friend, which is like being true to your values takes intentionality and
Mhm.
focus. And I think what's interesting with having ADHD, and I have it as well, as a lot of people talk about it as attention, it's also about intention. And
Yeah.
so being intentional takes energy. And when you're tired, or something's easy or would be easier if you just made it easier by not necessarily like putting up a fight or sharing things in a certain way. Like sometimes we just do that and that's okay too. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Again, the idea isn't to be perfectly aligned every time, it's to be a human. And I really love that point you pulled out.
Sometimes you just have to
Um,
course correct, right? Like
Totally.
you go on a sprint for a week and then you have to really just like, have a lazy day at home and just relax and lay in bed and maybe you miss your workout plan for a day, but it's like you're always trying to get back to course correction. You can never stay on the same path forever. You have to like continue to just audit yourself and give yourself grace.
I love that term, audit yourself. That's really good. Um, okay. What are like 1 to 3 tried and true mental fitness tools that you use, or tools that basically help you manage your mind through what I call mental wellness challenges, stress, exhaustion, overwhelm, the kind of like the day-to-day stuff that, if left unattended, become, bigger mental health issues?
Yeah, I would definitely say, I'm responsible for a lot of scope, right? I mean, there's a lot of events I run. I'm running events across the country. I'm built in charge of all of our systems, internal databases. There's so many things that I'm constantly juggling and prioritizing, people and back end and all that stuff. Where if I don't have sleep, and this is a big lesson I learned starting off early, or in my career, I need sleep and I need to take care of my body because that plays a role into how I show up confidently, how I'm able to set boundaries, how I'm able to understand my regulation systems, keeping myself in homeostasis. Um, if I don't have a workout plan or any sort of physical activity in a day, I know it's harder for me to sleep. As an ADHD
Totally.
person, I need to expend energy to then have a good night's sleep, and that plays a role into all the cycles that I have throughout the days and the weeks and months, etc. So exercise is super critical. Sleep is super critical. Um, and definitely voicing my feelings to those that are trustworthy when necessary is also super critical. If you try to contain everything, you will not show up in ways that you feel happy and healthy, and it'll disturb everything else. So I know a lot of people who are stoics in a way where they just like keep pushing forward, but it will sharing how you're doing with others and having that sort of check in with a loved one or a family member or a friend is um, connection is important. Put it that way.
Totally. And I like how specific you are there because a lot of people will be like, oh, I talked to my therapist. Helpful, but also friends, also free, also
We're
helpful.
human
Like,
beings. You're social creatures, you know.
totally, totally. And I always say you got to go, it's in or out. When it's in, you push it down. And, this is where a lot of the conversation happens around dis-ease, like where when you start to push down those emotions, the feelings, the hard times, whatever, without sharing them somewhere, whether it's a piece of paper with a friend or something, shit gets wild. And so, yes, when people talk about connection, a lot of times it feels like it's like the extroverted form of connection where like you get energy from other people. It's not just that, it's also sharing.
Hmm.
So I love that as a call out.
You mentioned a good point there because
Yeah.
as an example, right? If you sharing how you're doing with someone actually builds strengthens that connection, that friendship, and that relationship because you are trusting that person with information on you. And obviously, what I've had to learn, and a lot of people still struggle with this, like who is that person? What is too much? What is too little? Right? And that comes back to how concretely do you know yourself? How
Totally.
solidified are you in your career? Whatever, because people have intention. This is part of the world we live in. But having those core people that you can really strengthen those ties with and be vulnerable and be honest in how you're doing, you build a connection that is sort of impenetrable in a way because you each have so much trust in each other. So it's been a game changer for me.
That's amazing. Now, did you make most of those friends as an adult, a kid, both?
Uh, I've actually had the ability to make friendships as an adult, similar to how I made friends in high school. I have a really strong high school friend group and also college friend group. So that's before, any sort of blow up global impact that I've been able to create. But those individuals, the same principles I still carry with me, into my adult friendships a little more sparingly because again, it's kind of very different to manage friendships when you're working and as a professional than when you're younger. When you're younger, you're more thinking about like, what are we doing on a Friday night? Like the Lakers playing the Knicks, like whatever, right? But you have friendships now where you're aligned on interests and values and activities and hobbies. Like I have my running friends. I have more people that are like, let's go escape the city and go hiking. I have people if I want to go read a book in the park, I hit up those people. So it's kind of a little more niche focus now.
I love it. That's great. And what's a life motto lesson that you've been living by recently?
You know, I would say a big one has been don't put your value in your output from a professional lens. Um, I think for a while, you still struggle with this from time to time, is like you put your sense of self worth with how much you output and create from a business standpoint. How much are you generating revenue? How big is your company? How much scope do you have? Yada, yada, yada. I had to really ask myself what's important to me and, like, again, what's my values are. And friends, family, feeling happy, feeling healthy. How can you balance all of those and not over sacrifice one for the other? Obviously, there's points in your life where you're really leaning into one of those areas. Um, but it's how can you not sacrifice one entirely for the other? And that's kind of what I've always been navigating continuously.
Yeah, that's big, and I think all of us can relate to that. So that's a good one. Um, I want you to pretend that you could give yourself advice now to your middle school self. What would you say to him?
I would just say keep going. There's a level of survival, if you will, that I had to go through where I was just like, I don't have an alternative. I just have to keep moving. But I do think that the compounding effect of just keep pushing forward and keep being optimistic and open minded. Um, and better days are always ahead.
Yeah. Um, Who is somebody who's changed your life for the better and how?
I mean, I always have to give credit to my mom. My mom has been someone who's the most caring and loving and, my rock in ways that I would not be where I am without her. So she's helped me navigate so many different situations, have taken so much time out of her busy work week to take care of me and navigate for me. So, and give me the hard, harsh truth when I'm being a delusional idiot sometimes. So, I owe a lot to her. So I would always say she's been the biggest, force in where I am today.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Um, I hope you tell her thank you today, by the way. Um, very cool. Okay, two more questions.
Mhm.
So the first is mental fitness is a new and growing field. And a lot of times people think it's about like these perfect routines, like, you know, you wake up at the same time every day and you do X and you do Y. Um, but for most of us, it's like this, like, you know, we're switching up what we choose to do and when we choose to do it. For somebody who's never thought about their mind or mental state before, what advice would you give them about where to start or how to think about it or a resource or anything?
Yeah. Um, First of all, I want to say I'm not robotic and nobody is. I
Yeah.
stayed up way too late last night as an example, and I have a lot of work to do today, and I didn't hit the gym this morning, and that's totally okay, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where you have to have you have to build an identity for yourself where what you care about and what you do aligns with who you are. And I think that comes with really exploring what makes you motivated and what actually intrigues you, and then how quickly do you bounce back from failure towards achieving that. So as an example, if you want to write a book, right, how and you really think deeply of what the why is behind that, and you pursue that, writing a book is could be a year-long process, right? And if you really commit to that and can navigate the weekends of lack of motivation, you have other responsibilities, though you're struggling with creativity, it's how quickly and how effectively can you bounce back from those days and just keep pushing forward, right? And that's how you continue to build that sense of mental fitness and belief in yourself that you can overcome challenges because you have the skills, you have the tools. It's just the mental fortitude and discipline and all the other things supporting that, like obviously eating healthy, taking care of your relationships, asking for help, learning new skills, right? And all that plays a role into how you show up in your day to day. And this applies across anything. Biking, I didn't mountain bike until 4 months before I biked across Iceland, right? Like I'm swimming a 2K in Long Island Sound in 2 months, and I was never an athletic swimmer. I ran a half marathon, 2 months ago or a month ago, and I started training that December, and I threw shot put and discus when I ran track and field, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, if you put your mind to something, set that goal, how does it align with you and what you care about, and how quickly can you, navigate those non-motivating days is how you build that mental fitness and belief that you are capable. And that comes with building confidence as well.
Totally. Really well said, Skylar. This has been so much fun. You are an absolute delight, very inspiring. I'm laughing. Even Skylar skips the gym every now and again.
I did not go
And
this morning at all. I'll say that right
still a
now.
mental fitness athlete and a
It was
physical
on my
fitness
calendar
athlete.
too.
Oh, I can't believe you. I
Yeah.
absolutely can't believe you. No, but it's amazing. I mean, I feel like you're doing these like very inhuman things and you still approach your life and your world with like humanity. And at the end of the day, like that's what this is all about. I always like to say you could, be a gym rat in certain times in your life and then once you leave, it's not that you'd never come back because you missed a day. It's like you find your way back and I really love what you were saying about just being really gentle about that. So,
Yeah.
Skylar, thanks for being on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you
And
for having
thank you,
me.
of course. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of the Modern Mind interview series. We look forward to seeing you back here for the next show.